Hi, my name's Rowena. My family kicked me out on Christmas night. No yelling, no chaos. Just one sentence. You're nothing to us. Just leave. And I did, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a trust they thought I'd forgotten. But 5 days later, they left me 45 missed calls. Why? Because I didn't just walk away. I left something behind. They erased me from group chats, told neighbors I was just staying temporarily, called me sensitive, re-gifted the scarf I made, planned their wedding in the house I legally owned. But the truth? It was always mine. They just didn't read the fine print. So, how do you forgive a family that deletes your existence, then begs you to come back? Let me tell you everything. It was already dusk when I pulled into the driveway. Christmas Eve in Bourne always had that eerie hush, where the air feels too still and the porch lights seem too bright. I paused before grabbing my overnight bag, more out of habit than hope. This year, I didn't pack a gift. Inside, the house was perfectly staged, cinnamon candles burning near the stairs, Bing Crosby crooning from a Bluetooth speaker, wine glasses already half-filled on the console table. Everything said home, except no one turned their head when I walked in. "Oh, hey!" Callista called out over her shoulder. She was standing near the fireplace, arranging pine cones like it was her job. "Glad you made it." That was it. Valora barely looked up from setting the table. Galen gave me a brief nod, as though I'd just passed him in a grocery aisle. I stood there for a second too long, waiting for, I don't even know. An embrace? A joke? A seat at the table, maybe. But when I glanced over, there were name cards, one for each person, except me. Valora looked over her shoulder and motioned. "You can sit there." She gestured to a metal folding chair next to the kitchen doorway. I dragged it out quietly and sat, the vinyl creaking under me. My view was half the living room, half the sink. And the smells, ham glaze, stuffing, sugar cookies, mingled with the sharp scent of oven cleaner still lingering from Valora's pre-holiday deep scrub. No one made eye contact. Not really. Not unless they needed something. Dinner began with a toast. Thaddeus raised his glass and said, "To tradition, to family." I lifted mine out of politeness. Nobody clinked with me. Callista beamed as everyone complimented the table settings. "Thank you. I thought the gold ribbon added warmth." Valora nodded emphatically. "She always had such taste," Valora added, looking straight at Callista. "Just like her Aunt Margaret." I swallowed hard, the mashed potatoes suddenly dry in my mouth. No one asked about my life, my work, the certification exam I passed last month. Galen got 3 questions about his gym. I didn't get a single one about anything. After dessert, people drifted into the living room. Laughter floated from the sofa, where Callista was showing photos from her upcoming bachelorette weekend. Valora walked past me and paused. "Help with the dishes, will you?" I glanced around. The others had wine refills in hand, already sinking into holiday movies and leftover pie. I stood, nodded, and carried a stack of plates to the kitchen. As I scrubbed the gravy-streaked pans, a younger cousin leaned into the doorway and said, loud enough for me to hear, "Is she like the maid or something?" I didn't respond. I rinsed another plate. I wasn't part of the memory. I was just the maintenance. Through the kitchen pass-through window, I could see Callista and Valora giggling at something Galen whispered. I heard the words Napa and February tossed around casually. Apparently, a New Year's getaway was being planned. I wasn't included. Of course I wasn't. The volume of the TV spiked as someone turned on It's a Wonderful Life. I was still loading dishes when the camera flashed. They'd taken a family photo, without me. Again. I walked in just as they were dispersing. No one looked guilty. No one looked surprised. Standing at the sink again, I wiped my hands dry and leaned against the counter. My reflection in the microwave door looked faint, like I was slowly fading out of the frame. I've been here before, not just physically, emotionally, forgotten in toasts, missing from framed pictures, cooking, cleaning, keeping quiet, because keeping quiet made things easier, for them. For me, It made everything heavier. I once read, "The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference." Elie Wiesel wrote that. I didn't understand it when I was younger. I do now. Indifference doesn't stab. It starves. After the last dish was shelved, I wiped the counter down in silence. Behind me, the credits of the movie rolled. Callista walked by, holding her empty wine glass. "Don't forget the counter," she said, breezing past like a breeze too cold for December. I paused, sponge still in hand, staring out through the pass-through window at my family laughing. They didn't see me then, but they will. Christmas morning arrived without warning. I woke to the hum of voices and the smell of maple sausage already drifting from the kitchen. The couch creaked beneath me as I sat up, tugging the blanket tighter around my shoulders. There was no good reason I was on the couch, other than that my old room had become a makeshift storage space somewhere between Callista's boutique inventory and Dad's tools. Upstairs, laughter bounced off the walls. I could hear the shower running. Callista's voice rose above the rest, directing, laughing, filling the house like it was hers. I stepped into the hallway and caught my reflection in the foyer mirror. Same hoodie I'd worn the night before. Same eyes trying too hard not to look disappointed. In the kitchen, Callista stood proudly as Valora handed her a plate. "I don't know what we'd do without you," Mom said, in that way that told everyone what side they should be clapping for. "She even stayed up late making the cranberry glaze," Valora continued. "That's commitment." I nearly laughed. I had made that glaze, along with prepping every dish except the ham, which Callista overcooked slightly, but no one seemed to notice. Or care. Galen chimed in, pointing at the centerpiece on the table. "She did that all herself. It's stunning." Of course she didn't. I arranged those damn pine cones while Callista FaceTimed with a friend about her wedding colors. I stayed quiet. Again. Because at that moment, correcting the record felt like trying to nail jelly to a wall. Later, everyone gathered for family photos in the sunroom. I found them already dressed in matching pajamas. Snowflakes, soft gray, the kind you'd see in a catalog. I hadn't been given a pair. Callista spotted me in the hallway. "Oh, did you bring the old ones from last year? That works too." That wasn't a question. I lingered at the edge of the room as the camera clicked. Smiles, poses, kisses on cheeks. My niece turned to me and whispered, "Aren't you in the family photo?" I looked at her. "Not this time." She nodded like it made sense. The gift exchange began with a flourish. Callista passed out glossy boxes with gold bows, all labeled perfectly. "You always get me," someone said, unwrapping a silk robe. "You're too good," another laughed, opening a monogrammed candle set. I waited. I thought maybe my name would come up. Maybe I was last. Maybe she saved the best for last. Not because I believed that, but because hoping still came easier than accepting. When the last box was handed out, and the trash bags rustled, and someone called for a refill of eggnog, I finally knelt to check under the tree. Nothing. Valora looked over. "Maybe it got lost in shipping," she said, not unkindly, but too quickly. Callista sipped her mimosa. "Or maybe Santa thought you already had everything you need?" I blinked, then nodded. "I guess so." It felt like I'd swallowed glass. But I smiled anyway. I slipped away to the kitchen, poured coffee into a chipped mug that read, "World's Okayest Sister." The steam curled into my face. Behind me, I heard Callista whisper to Valora, "She's so sensitive. Always been." I gripped the counter. Maya Angelou's voice echoed in my head. "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel." Right then, I felt like a faded photo in someone else's frame. Present, but not preserved. As the sound of torn wrapping paper and forced laughter spilled down the hallway, I grabbed my jacket from the back of a chair. I needed air. Outside, the sky was an endless gray stretch over Texas rooftops. Cold bit through my sleeves. I didn't care. I stood on the porch staring at nothing. Inside, I heard Galen's voice. "Hey, don't forget to clean the mugs." I didn't flinch. I just looked up and let the wind remind me that even December air could feel more honest than people. "I don't belong here," I whispered. And for the first time, it didn't sound like a complaint. It sounded like a plan. The afternoon sun hit the patio just enough to cast long shadows across the floor, slanting through the glass doors behind me. I sat alone with a lukewarm cup of coffee, barely sipped, watching them through the window like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I was someone's neighbor who'd wandered into the wrong yard and decided to stay. Inside, they were laughing. My mother, with that particular kind of laugh that always carried just a little too loud when she wanted someone to hear it. Callista was twirling her engagement ring as she spoke, something about rustic florals and seasonal menus. Galen nodded like his opinion mattered more than oxygen, and as I watched, something in that sound, Mom's laugh, too polished to be spontaneous, took me back to a night I hadn't thought about in years. I was 22, fresh out of school, working 2 part-time jobs while trying to finish a graphic design certificate. Callista had volunteered for a local charity gala, or at least that's what she told everyone. In reality, she dropped the concept on me with a breezy, "You're good with fonts, right?" and vanished for 3 weeks. I designed the brochure, the invites, the logo, even coordinated with the printer on her behalf. The night of the event, I stood at the back of the hall while she gave a speech thanking everyone who helped bring my vision to life. When it was over, Valora walked up beside me, drink in hand. She didn't say thank you. She didn't even say well done. She just looked at me and said, "Some of us lead, others support. That's just balance, Rowena." As if invisibility was a family tradition I should be proud to inherit. Back in the present, I reached for a champagne flute someone had left on the patio table. It still had lipstick on the rim, Callista's, no doubt. I carried it back inside like it was my job. As I stepped through the door, I caught the tail end of her sentence. "We're thinking of using the house for the ceremony." I stopped short. "The house?" She turned, eyes wide with that fake surprised innocence she wore like perfume. "Oh, yeah, didn't we mention it? We figured it'd be perfect, sentimental and all." Valora chimed in, stirring her tea without looking at me. "We'll make sure the guest room's cleared out before the decorator comes," Galen added. "There's plenty of space, especially if it's just us living here by then." I looked around at all 3 of them. No one blinked, no one flinched. They weren't planning around me. They were planning without me. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just looked at Callista and said, "Guess I won't have to RSVP then." She blinked, then recovered with a smile. "Of course not. You're always welcome to come, if you want." A little later, as the light softened into golden tones, everyone shuffled into the living room for Callista's announcement post photo. Galen set up the ring light. Valora fluffed a pillow like it mattered. Thaddeus just stayed in his recliner. I stood behind the hallway arch, watching as they posed like a catalog spread. Galen took a selfie of the group. Callista posted it within seconds. The caption read, "Home is where love lives. Family first." I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I didn't even exist in it. Instead, I turned, walked upstairs, and opened my laptop. There was a folder on the desktop I hadn't opened in months. I'd labeled it Contingency, back when I still believed in Plan Bs. Inside were things I never meant to use. Scanned copies of family financial documents, screenshots, clipped audio files, handwritten notes from Margaret that had never made it into the family albums. I hovered the cursor over one file, then another. There's a difference between being invisible and being underestimated. By the time the sun climbed above the treetops, I was already on my 2nd cup of coffee. The kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a long pause in a conversation that never included you. I sat at the corner of the counter, wrapping my fingers around the mug, more for something to do than warmth. The air outside looked brisk, but inside it was just sterile. From where I sat, I could hear muffled voices. Valora and Callista were in the sunroom, the glass door mostly shut, but not all the way. Their tones were low, calculated. Every now and then, a word would carry, Timeline, registry, nursery. My name didn't come up, not directly. But I heard it between the lines. They weren't discussing a wedding, they were designing a life. And I was a logistical problem they hadn't yet moved out of the blueprint. Later that morning, I overheard Callista in the hallway with Galen. She said, "It's already half cleared. Might as well make it the nursery. I told Mom I'd need the closet space, and she said she'd make sure the boxes were gone before the decorators arrive." I stepped around the corner slowly, my voice calm. "What room are you talking about?" Callista blinked, surprised to see me, but recovered quickly. "The guest room, yours. I mean, was. We didn't think you'd mind." Valora walked up behind her. "You should probably start packing, Rowena. It's going to get hectic soon, and we'll need space to work." "Pack?" I repeated, not even trying to soften the edge in my voice. Valora smiled gently, that saccharine tone only mothers know how to weaponize. "Oh, honey, didn't anyone tell you?" No one had. The silence between her question and my breath was louder than anything else in that hallway. I returned to my room, if it could still be called that, and sat on the bed. For a long while, I didn't move. I thought about all the times I'd folded my life around theirs, changed jobs to stay closer, declined leases to save money when Dad was sick, let Callista borrow my room when she was going through a breakup. I wasn't staying in their house. I was borrowing my absence. A little while later, I pulled out my wallet to pay for a scheduled grocery delivery. Just a simple charge. My card declined. I blinked, tried again. Declined. I opened my banking app, and it froze, asking me to re-verify my identity. When I finally got through to someone at the bank, the woman on the line was courteous. Almost too courteous. "Ma'am, it appears your account access has been restricted due to a household guardian protocol. The joint holder initiated a security filter last evening." "Joint holder?" I asked, knowing the answer before she said it. "Yes, someone named Callista Whitlock." My breath left in one slow exhale. I checked my email. An auto-forward had come through the night before. Legal language, small print, Callista's signature at the bottom of a document I had no memory of signing. They weren't just planning around me. They were making sure I had no footing left to stand on. I didn't confront anyone, not yet. Instead, I took screenshots. I downloaded the PDF. I created a new folder on my personal drive and named it Lines Crossed. I emailed copies to myself, then changed every password I had. I didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the day. Not at dinner, not when Valor offered me a small slice of leftover pie like nothing had happened. I just nodded. "When people show you who they are," Maya Angelou once said, "believe them the first time." After midnight, I deleted the family group chat from my phone. I opened a new folder on my laptop and typed its name slowly, deliberately. Exit plan. They don't know yet, but I'm not the one getting removed. The house smelled like cinnamon and ego. It was December 27th, the morning of Valora's precious post-Christmas brunch, which she considered more sacred than the holiday itself. I'd been up since 6, folding linen napkins and arranging place cards. Not because anyone asked me to, because if I didn't, no one would have noticed they were missing. Just that something felt off, and somehow that would be my fault too. By the time the first guests arrived, I was already running on caffeine and restraint. Most of them were distant relatives or family friends I hadn't seen since Margaret's funeral. Callista made sure to greet each one like she was the hostess of some curated magazine spread. Hair curled, lipstick perfect, smile surgically bright. I stood near the hallway arch, quietly placing extra cups near the drink station, when an older woman with a brooch and too much perfume tapped me on the arm. "Could you ask the host if they have more decaf?" she said. I blinked. "Sure," I replied, forcing a polite nod. She smiled, completely unaware. Later, I heard her mutter to another guest, "She's not Callista's assistant? I thought she was setting up." That one hit different. I wasn't invisible. I was mislabeled. And that's worse. Callista, meanwhile, was soaking in admiration like it was her wedding day already. Galen hovered nearby, playing the quiet fiancé role, chiming in just enough to seem present, but not enough to upstage her. Then came the toast. Valora raised her glass, rose-tinted and trembling with vintage pride. "To the people who hold this family together," she said, glancing around. "Callista, Galen, and of course, the love and support that surrounds us." Everyone clapped. Not one pair of eyes landed on me. Even Eunice, who usually read a room better than anyone, avoided my gaze. That's the thing about group silence. It's not just absence, it's agreement. I felt myself shrink, not from sadness, but from clarity. They weren't going to correct the record. Not now, not ever. After the brunch, I started clearing the plates. No one offered to help. Callista walked past me, handed me a dish, and said, "Thanks for handling this." I didn't respond. I just turned to her as she reached the kitchen doorway. "You know I won't be at your wedding." She stopped mid-step. "What?" I dried my hands on a towel. "Just giving you a heads up. Don't waste a seat or fake a smile." Her lips parted like she had something ready, but nothing came out. I walked away before she could try. Later that day, I wandered into the hallway and stood in front of the old family portrait. It was one of those formal shots. Matching outfits, fake smiles, everyone strategically posed. I was there, technically. Cropped at the edge, almost out of frame. A suggestion more than a subject. I remembered a birthday years ago. The cake said, "Happy birthday," with no name. Valora laughed. Said the bakery forgot it, but I always knew better. I whispered to no one. I've erased myself so many times, I almost forgot what I looked like. That night, while the house slept, I opened my laptop and uploaded a video file from the brunch. Just a minute-long clip. Callista accepting praise for a meal I prepped. Valora beaming while listing her daughter's virtues. The camera panned. I was in the background, collecting plates, cleaning counters. I named the file, Silent Evidence. They didn't hear me speak. But soon, they'll hear what they said. The table was set again. This time for the neighborhood dinner. Another performance masked as family unity. I moved around the house silently, setting chairs, folding napkins, straightening what Callista called the aesthetic. She was in the living room, rehearsing a little speech Valora had written for her. Galen hovered nearby, sipping something warm from a travel mug, like this was just another rehearsal dinner for the life they'd already claimed. I kept to the edges. I always did. The doorbell rang, then another. Soon, the living room filled with people we only saw twice a year, once for show, once for damage control. I offered drinks, passed around cheese platters. No one seemed to question why I was doing it. It was as if they expected it. In the middle of it all, I caught a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Valora, standing by the hallway arch with one of the neighbors, smiled as she gestured my way. "She's just staying until she figures things out. Poor thing. Between jobs right now, but we're happy to help." The woman nodded, sympathetic. "It's good of you to take her in." Like I was a stray, Callista passed by, laughing as she whispered to her cousin, "If she ever finds that next step." I didn't say anything, just held my tray a little tighter. You can live in a house and still be considered a visitor, a well-mannered one at best. Dinner was served. The guests clinked glasses, raved about Callista's engagement. Someone called Galen a lucky man. He smirked and said, "I just want a clean house to start fresh." Chuckles. Valora stood. "To moving forward," she said, and everyone raised their glasses. I stared into mine. Didn't drink. Couldn't. Afterward, while people drifted into small talk and cookies, I started clearing dishes. My default. Callista breezed into the kitchen, grabbed a water bottle, and turned to leave. I stopped her with a question. "Do you even see me here? Or just what I clean?" She looked at me, expression unreadable. "Rowena, don't start." Valora entered, drying her hands on a cloth napkin. Callista cut in again. Honestly, we've all been thinking it's time you left. Valora didn't flinch. Thaddeus was standing behind her, saying nothing. As always. Then Callista dropped it. Like it wasn't even sharp. You're nothing to us. Just leave. The words didn't pierce. They landed flat, like something she'd been rehearsing. Galen shifted as if to say something, but Callista raised her hand slightly. That was enough to shut him up. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I just stared at all of them, their decorum, their hollow smiles, their quiet complicity. And then I walked out. That's the thing about being erased. Sometimes it frees you. Back in my room. No, in the room I had borrowed. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything or collapse onto the mattress. I opened my journal and wrote one line. I never had a room, just borrowed walls. Then I packed, not with haste, with precision. Essentials first, documents, laptop, chargers. Then memories I still wanted to keep. Letters, photos no one else knew I had. Before I zipped the bag closed, I opened a folder on my computer titled Legal. Inside were the family trust documents Margaret left. The ones no one asked about because they assumed it had gone Callista's way. I uploaded them to a private cloud, backed them up 3 times, added password protection. They told me to leave. They didn't say what I could take with me. I stepped out into the cold, pulling the duffel strap tighter across my shoulder. The front door clicked shut behind me, not with a slam, but with the sound of finality. Not a single voice called after me. No one ran down the steps. That's how you know when someone's really done with you. They don't even need to make it dramatic. The streets were mostly empty, lit in soft pools of amber from the overhead lights. Christmas lights still blinked in windows, as if mocking the silence between my steps. I didn't have a plan. I just walked. Bag over one shoulder, laptop in hand. The night air bit into my fingers. At some point, my feet turned instinctively toward a place I hadn't been in months. Eunice's house. Her porch light always stayed on. A warm glow even when the rest of the world turned cold. I hesitated for a moment at the gate. I had nothing to offer her but silence and a request. She opened the door with cautious eyes that softened the second she saw my face. "Do you have space for one more night?" I asked. She stepped aside. "I always have space for someone who tells the truth." We didn't talk much. She made tea while I folded myself into the corner of her couch, like a person trying to vanish politely. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She sat beside me, sipped slowly, and waited for my breath to even out. That kind of kindness feels foreign when you're used to earning your place. After she went to bed, I sat up in the glow of the living room lamp and opened my phone. The family group chat was gone. Not muted, not archived. Gone. I searched for it again, scrolled up, checked folders. Nothing. I wasn't removed. They deleted the thread entirely and made a new one. A message from my cousin appeared. A screenshot of the new group. Family plus wedding core. Below it, a single comment from Callista. Didn't want her energy messing up the vibe. I stared at it for a long time before saving the image into my receipts folder. I didn't feel surprised, just clarified. This was always about pruning the narrative. Clean photos, curated love, a family that only performs when there's applause. They didn't just push me out. They wanted to delete the version of me that remembered too much. I opened my laptop, created a new folder, named it Living Evidence. Inside, I dropped everything: screenshots, financial scans, voice memos from Margaret, photos that never made the family albums, a backup of the brunch video where Valora called Callista the one who always holds us together, even the clip where I was mistaken for the help. Little truths lined up in quiet defiance, because someday someone would ask what really happened, and I'd have proof that I was never just bitter. I was erased on purpose. As I scrolled through the files, I landed on a clip labeled 11:24 p.m. hallway. It was a recording I'd forgotten I'd started. It caught Callista's voice clearly. If we get her out before the wedding, the house paperwork gets easier. No awkward overlap. Galen's voice was faint, but clear enough. You really think she'll just leave? Callista laughed. She always does. She doesn't fight. I clicked upload. They can erase me from a group chat, but not from a trust fund. I woke before the sun crept over Eunice's blinds. The house was still, quiet in the kind of way that doesn't beg for explanation. She was already in the kitchen, heating water like it was just another Thursday, not the morning after my entire life had detonated. Your tea's by the sink, she said without turning around. I sipped in silence, but something inside me felt shifted. Not healed, not okay, but steadier. My hand no longer trembled. My heart wasn't racing. Instead, I felt the kind of calm that meant I was no longer waiting for someone to come rescue me. I opened my inbox. No new messages. That silence, that eerie pause before a storm, was more telling than 1,000 apologies. I knew how this worked. They weren't quiet because they didn't care. They were quiet because they were calculating. I thought back to the night before. The hallway, the tension, the clip I'd uploaded, and the envelope. The one I'd slipped into Callista's wedding planner binder, tucked between menu samples and deposit receipts. Cream-colored, sealed with a gold sticker. Inside, a certified copy of Aunt Margaret's amended will, and a USB drive. On it, her final video message, recorded just 3 weeks before she passed. If they're going to take my space, I'd whispered as I tucked it in, I'll take their silence. Now, all I had to do was wait. It didn't take long. At 10:03 a.m., Eunice's landline rang. She picked it up, eyes already on me. Is Rowena there? Callista's voice was unmistakable, even muffled. Eunice replied, calm as ever. She's not available, but I imagine she will be soon. By noon, Valora sent out a group email. Urgent, need to talk. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. A text from my cousin followed, short and panicked. Whatever you left in that folder, they're freaking out. Good. By early afternoon, my phone was a battlefield. 31 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, all from the people who, just days ago, said I didn't belong. Callista's first message was measured. Rowena, this isn't necessary. You've made your point. The second, more brittle. Do you really think this is what Margaret would have wanted? Then Valora chimed in, low and practiced. We were trying to help. It was never personal. And Thaddeus? Silent, as always. But his name popped up in the log anyway. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I played each voicemail once, then blocked the numbers. Not out of spite, out of peace. Silence, someone once said, is the most powerful scream. At 3:27 p.m., I received an email from the estate attorney. Per your instruction, the family has now been formally notified. Let us know how you'd like to proceed. I closed the laptop gently. Inhaled. Exhaled. No shaking. No tears. Just the weight of truth finally settling where it always belonged. On them. I picked up my phone and texted my cousin back. Let them stew. I haven't even started. They wanted me gone. Now they'll feel what absence really costs. The phone wouldn't stop. I left it face down on the kitchen table at Eunice's, screen lighting up every few seconds, like a metronome ticking through a symphony of panic. I didn't even flinch. My tea was warm, my back straight, my breath calm. It was strange. How easy it was to ignore people who once held the remote control to your sense of worth. By the time I finally flipped the phone over, the count had hit 45 missed calls, 12 voicemails, Valora, Callista, Galen, even Thaddeus, whose silence was usually mistaken for wisdom, but was in fact just cowardice. They were unraveling. Callista's first voicemail came in syrupy. You don't have to be petty about this. Her second was more clipped. Just call me. This isn't fair, Rowena. The third came with a brittle edge. Is this really the kind of person you want to be? Valora's voice was as steady as ever, but I'd learned to listen for the tremble beneath it. We were trying to keep things in order, she said. Margaret would have wanted unity. You've misunderstood everything. No, I hadn't. Then Galen's text pinged in. Please talk to her. She's not well. That made me laugh, once. A short, dry breath. Not at the message itself, but at the absurdity that after everything, I was still supposed to manage her emotional needs. Thaddeus finally had broken his saintly silence. His text read, This is going too far. No, hi. No, are you okay? Just judgment in 18 characters. I listened to each voicemail once, then archived them. Not out of spite, but because none of them mattered anymore. They weren't confessions. They were damage control. I thought I might feel triumphant. Instead, I felt still. Clean. A message from my cousin popped up a few minutes later. Your mom lost it when she saw the name on the trustee line. I imagined it clearly. Valora, standing in the lawyer's office, heels too tight, smile too brittle. She flips the page, expecting Callista's name printed in black ink. But instead, Rowena Whitlock, sole beneficiary. She reportedly turned to the attorney and asked, Is this even real? He looked her dead in the eye and said, It was signed and witnessed months before she passed. Margaret was very clear. Clearer than any of them had ever been with me. I walked to the back porch and sat down in one of Eunice's old wicker chairs. The winter air was crisp, but not punishing. I held a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm without me noticing. It didn't matter. In the quiet, I pulled out the letter Margaret had handwritten to me. Her script, precise and elegant. You don't owe them history, you owe yourself peace. I hadn't cried yet. Not when they erased me. Not when they tried to take what wasn't theirs. And not now, when I finally had the thing they feared most. Truth that didn't need witnesses. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. They'd spent years shaping a story where I was the shadow. And now, all I had to do was stand still, and their version would collapse. I opened the voicemail app one last time, selected all, deleted. Then, I opened a blank email, stared at it for a moment, typed nothing, closed the tab. They're finally hearing me, and I'm done talking. At exactly 9:03 a.m., my inbox pinged. Subject line, Transfer of Legal Authority, Final Confirmation. I opened it without hesitation. The message was brief, clinical. As of today, all assets listed under the Whitlock Trust have been legally transferred to your sole ownership. Attached are the full documents, including the updated house deed, account access, and title declarations. Let us know how you'd like to proceed with formal notifications. I stared at the screen, still in my robe, tea cooling on the table beside me. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I just nodded. Once. Control isn't loud. It's silent and documented. I clicked download, saved the PDFs in 3 separate encrypted folders, and started composing the letter. Not an email. A formal PDF, the kind that said, I have no more patience, but I still have my dignity. It was addressed to Valora, Callista, and Thaddeus. The subject, Notice of Trust Execution and Transfer of Authority. It read like a letter from a lawyer, because I borrowed their tone. No emotional weight, just dates, signatures, attachments, instructions. Boundaries, not explanations. I signed it with my full name, Rowena Margaret Whitlock. Then I hit send. The silence that followed was immediate. No, what is this? No, can we talk? Not yet. They were regrouping, spinning their next story. But this time, I had beaten them to the punchline. Later that afternoon, a text popped up from my cousin, attached to a blurry video clip. They re-gifted the scarf you made. I pressed play. There was Callista, holding up a red knitted scarf. I remembered every loop, every knot. I'd spent 2 nights making it by hand for Valora 2 Christmases ago. I'd even tied it with a gold ribbon and added a handwritten card that read, To the woman who never wanted warmth, but deserves it anyway. Now it was being unwrapped by Galen. Callista smiled sweetly into the camera and said, I always knew he'd look great in red. I didn't even curse. I just opened my photo archive and found a picture of the original gift tag, still saved in my drafts folder. My handwriting, my words. I uploaded it to the Living Evidence folder and captioned the photo. Funny. I always saw it on a liar. Then, as the sun began to set over Eunice's front lawn, I posted something on social media. Nothing dramatic. No names. Just a short note. Some people inherit money, others inherit memory. I got both. One by choice, one by accident. No tags, no hashtags. I turned off the comments before I closed the app. Then I stepped outside, let the cold wind press against my cheeks like a reset button, and breathed. I didn't need them to see it. I just needed them to know it was out there. Back inside, I walked past the table, pulled out one last cream envelope from my files. Into it, I slipped printed copies of the trust deed, ownership letters, and legal proof that the house they tried to redesign around me was mine. I sealed it with a gold sticker, just like the one Margaret used on her Christmas cards. If they want to fight this, they'll have to read the fine print. The morning air inside Eunice's kitchen was still. Not heavy, not sharp. Just still. I wrapped both hands around the ceramic mug and watched condensation edge its way down the frosted window. There were no messages waiting for me, no new calls, no more thinly veiled threats wrapped in family pleasantries. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like neglect. It felt earned. I used to crave their voices. Now I couldn't imagine what they could possibly say that I'd believe. Eunice moved around the kitchen with quiet grace. No probing, no unnecessary advice. Just presence. And then, just as I was halfway through my tea, she slid a small envelope across the table toward me. "She asked me to give you this," she said softly, "but only if things turned out exactly how they did." The envelope was pale blue. My name was written in slanted cursive I hadn't seen since last winter. Margaret. Inside was a single folded page, lined paper, ink that had faded just slightly with time. She hadn't typed it. She hadn't wanted it formal. She wanted it human. Rowena, if you're reading this, then they tried to take from you what was always yours. I saw it before you did. I saw the way you stood in rooms that refused to hold you, and kept standing anyway. Use this gift to build, not to prove. If you're spending time explaining your right to be at the table, it's not your table. Love, always, M. I let out a breath I hadn't noticed I'd been holding. Not a sob, not a sigh. Just something that sounded like release. Later that afternoon, I drove back to the house, not to make amends, not to deliver one last grand speech. I parked across the street, walked up the driveway, knocked once. Valora opened the door and stared like she'd seen a ghost who refused to haunt gently. "I'm not here to fight," I said, calm. "I'm just here to pick up what's mine." She said nothing, just stepped aside. I went around to the garage. There was one box labeled with my name in barely legible marker. I lifted it gently, no need to rush. I could feel her eyes on my back the whole time. On my way out, Thaddeus stepped into the driveway, hands in his pockets. Still silent, still useless. "You should know your place," he said coldly. I stopped, turned just enough to meet his gaze. "I do," I said. "It just wasn't here." Then I got in the car, and this time, I didn't look back. That night, back at Eunice's, I opened my journal for the first time in weeks. Not to write about them, but about me. I listed paint colors, new apartment addresses, a job opening I'd bookmarked 3 months ago and finally felt free to pursue. I jotted down the name of a bookstore I'd passed 100 times but never walked into. I wrote about the freedom of quiet meals, unshared calendars, and choosing what to cook for dinner without being told the carrots were overdone. Healing doesn't mean making peace with them. Sometimes it's just making space for yourself. Before bed, I opened the folder titled Living Evidence, the one where I had stored every receipt, every voicemail, every thread of truth they had tried to erase. And then, I deleted it all. Every file, every screenshot, Every plan. They don't get to live in my future, not even as shadows. January 1st. The world felt cleaner than it had any right to. A breeze cut across the driveway as I stepped out of the car, envelope in one hand, USB in the other. I didn't pause before walking up the familiar steps of the house. No hesitation, no need for permission. Inside, they were all there. Valora by the fireplace, Callista straightening the hem of her sweater, like she was still on camera, Galen pretending not to be bored, and Thaddeus, silent, as usual. "Happy New Year," I said, my tone level. "Let's begin it honestly." I walked straight to the TV, turned it on, and inserted the USB without asking. The screen flickered, and there she was. Margaret, in one of her favorite shawls, seated in that sunroom chair that everyone had quietly pretended wasn't hers anymore. Her voice was steady, unapologetic. If this is being played, then someone forgot what truth looks like. I didn't choose Rowena because she begged. I chose her because she never performed. Because while the rest of you were too busy curating perfection, she showed up. In her flaws, in her silence, in her presence. No one breathed. Callista's posture tensed, her knuckles white around her glass. Margaret continued, unfazed by their discomfort, even from the grave. I leave my legacy to the one who never asked, but always stood. And if that offends anyone, then maybe they should ask why silence scared them more than screaming. The video ended. The room didn't move. I pulled out my phone and tapped on the second file. A voice recording played through the speaker. This one from Margaret's estate attorney, dated 2 weeks after her will was filed. As part of her instruction, a sealed statement was submitted, confirming that Mrs. Whitlock and Ms. Callista attempted to challenge the distribution via a back-channel petition, which was denied. Rowena was informed, but declined litigation. I looked at them one by one. But peace, I said quietly, doesn't come from pretending. It comes from knowing. I walked to the coffee table and set down a neat stack of documents, title deeds, banking transfers, trustee notifications, everything they once hoped to intercept. Valora opened her mouth to speak, but I lifted a hand. "I'm not angry, I'm just done." Callista muttered, "You really think this makes you the bigger person?" I turned to her, voice low, unwavering. "I'm not interested in being bigger. I'm interested in being out." Thaddeus stood suddenly, as if he'd finally remembered he had legs. "You could have handled this differently." "I did," I replied, "for years, and none of you noticed." I walked to the door. "This was never about you seeing me," I added as I opened it. "It was about me finally seeing myself." Then I left, and this time, I didn't take a single look over my shoulder. A week later, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment with sun-bleached floors and a view of absolutely nothing important. It smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. I hung one thing on the wall, a single handwritten note from Margaret that read, "Use it boldly." And I have. Not to prove I deserved anything, but to build something no one could take from me again. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it Volume 1. This story isn't about who threw me out. It's about who I became when I stopped knocking. Sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving. It's realizing you stayed far too long, trying to be understood by people who were committed to misunderstanding you. Looking back, I don't regret the silence. I regret giving it meaning when it was really just avoidance. What I've learned is this. You don't owe anyone your suffering just to make them comfortable. You don't have to prove your worth to those who were never willing to see it. Peace doesn't always come with a bow. Sometimes it comes with boundaries. Maybe you've lived your whole life thinking if you just worked harder, loved quieter, waited longer, they'd finally love you back the way you needed. But what if the real strength is walking away, without bitterness, without drama, just clarity? So I'm asking you, have you ever had to choose yourself in a room that made you feel small? What did it cost you? And was it worth it? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story touched something inside you, comment with a 1, or share where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, I still want to hear your thoughts. Tell me why. And let's have that conversation too. If this video meant something to you, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next story. Because sometimes the right words show up when you need them most. Thanks for being here. Your story matters too.